My world used to be painted in warm, bright colors. My mother, Ilara, was the artist who mixed them. Our home was filled with the smell of her oils and her contagious laughter. My father, Alistair, was the charismatic architect who built the structure of our lives. And Tiana, she was the sister I chose. We shared secrets, dreams, and 20 years of inside jokes. I was Amara, the pragmatic one, a freelance graphic designer, living in the beautiful shadow of their vibrant lives. I remember our last family dinner before everything shattered. Mom cooked her famous lasagna. Dad told stories about a demanding client. Tiana laughed so hard she snorted. I took a mental picture, thinking, this is happiness. This is permanent. I had no idea that this memory would become a relic, a fossil from a world that was about to be buried under an avalanche of betrayal. The foundation I stood on was already cracking, but I was too blissful to hear the sound. The call came at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Dad's voice was a frantic, broken thing I didn't recognize. Amara, it's your mother, the hospital. I don't remember the drive. The world was a blur. In the sterile, harshly lit ICU, I saw her. My vibrant, brilliant mother, dwarfed by machines, a tube down her throat. A massive stroke. The doctor used words like hemorrhagic, paralysis, and uncertain prognosis. I held her limp hand, my tears falling onto the white sheets. My father stood across from me, his face ashen. How could this happen? He whispered, but it felt like he was asking the universe, not me. Tiana arrived soon after, her eyes wide with performative shock. She wrapped me in a hug that felt suffocating. I'm here for you, Ams, for everything. In that moment of absolute desolation, I believed her. I leaned on them both, my pillars in the storm. I didn't know I was leaning on rotten wood that would soon splinter and betray me. Our home became a hospital ward. We moved my mother's bed into the living room so she could see the garden. I became a full-time caregiver, nurse, and advocate. I learned about medications, physical therapy exercises, and the heartbreaking language of my mother's eyes, which were now her only clear way to communicate. My design career was put on indefinite hold. My father retreated. The bills, the stress, I have to work, he'd say, leaving before dawn and returning long after dark. Tiana became a constant presence, a helpful shadow. She'd bring groceries, answer the door, and sit with my father in his study, their low murmurs a steady hum under the sound of medical equipment. He's just so broken, Amara, she'd tell me, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I'm just trying to be a sounding board for him. I was too exhausted, too consumed with keeping my mother alive, to see the sinister pattern they were weaving right in front of me. I was drowning, and they were the ones holding me under. It was the scent that first unsettled me. An unfamiliar, expensive jasmine perfume that clung to the air in my father's study. Tiana's new signature scent. Then it was the little things. The way my father's phone, which used to be left carelessly on the counter, was now always on his person, screen down. The way he and Tiana would share a glance when they thought I was tending to Mom, a look that was too intimate, too knowing. One evening, I mentioned I'd seen a charge on his credit card for a fancy restaurant. A business dinner, Amara, don't start, he snapped, his tone colder than I'd ever heard. Tiana chimed in, you're under so much strain, honey, you're seeing ghosts. They were a united front, and I was the hysterical, grieving daughter. The gaslighting was subtle, insidious. It made me question my own sanity. Was I just stressed? Was I imagining the tension that crackled between them? The seed of doubt was planted, and in the fertile soil of my grief it began to grow thorns. The breaking point was a text message. My father had asked me to print a document from his laptop. As the printer whirred, a notification from Tiana popped up on the screen. The preview was searingly clear. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? My blood ran cold. Last night he had told me he was working late at the office. With a trembling hand, I opened the chat history. I wish I hadn't. It wasn't just flirtation. It was a blueprint of their betrayal, dating back to before my mother's stroke. They discussed me, calling me naive and clingy. But the worst was about my mother. Tiana's message made me physically ill. It's cruel what's happening to her. My father's reply was a nail in my heart. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as our ticket to freedom. I felt the room tilt. The air left my lungs. I quietly closed the laptop, the proof burning behind my eyes. The grieving daughter was gone. In her place stood a woman with a mission. This was no longer a tragedy. It was a war. And I had just discovered their battle plans. I walked into the living room on shaky legs and knelt by my mother's bed. Her eyes, still so intelligent and aware, found mine. She could see the devastation on my face. A single tear escaped the corner of her eye and traced a path through her temple. I took her good hand, the one that could still grip mine weakly. I know, Mom, I whispered, my voice thick with a fury I had never known. I saw it, I know what they're doing. I leaned closer, my words a sacred vow spoken only for her. They think we are broken. They think we're weak. They think you are a burden. But I promise you on everything we are, they will pay for this. I will protect you, I will unravel them, and I will make sure they lose everything. Her fingers squeezed mine with a strength I didn't know she still possessed. It was all the confirmation I needed. In that silent exchange, a new alliance was forged. We were the wounded, the betrayed, but we were far from defeated. The hunt was on, and I was now the hunter. I became a master of deception. I shed my anger and cloaked myself in the persona of the exhausted, trusting daughter. I started encouraging their relationship. Dad, you should take Tiana to that new steakhouse. You both need a break from all this gloom, I'd say, my voice dripping with feigned concern. I saw the surprise, then the smug satisfaction in their eyes. They thought they had won. They thought I was blind. Inside, a cold, hard strategist was taking notes. I began my reconnaissance. I installed a keylogger on my father's computer. I used a hidden camera pen to photograph documents on his desk. I started a secret digital journal, not of my feelings but of their crimes, dates, times, financial anomalies. I called it the Reckoning File. I reached out to my Aunt Iris, my mother's fiercely loyal sister, and shared the truth. She became my confidant, my rock. We will make them pay, sweetheart, she said, her voice steely. I was no longer a victim. I was a ghost in my own home, gathering the weapons they were unknowingly handing me. My mother had always handled the family finances, and she taught me well. Using the access I'd gained, I began a forensic audit of their accounts. What I found was a web of lies and theft. My father was systematically draining their joint investment accounts. He had taken out a massive, secret second mortgage on our family home, the home my mother had poured her soul into. The money was being funneled into a separate account, one I traced to a bank in the Cayman Islands. Statements showed lavish dinners, hotel stays, and transfers to an account under Tiana's name. He was funding their new life with my mother's money, while she lay helpless in the next room. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. He wasn't just having an affair, he was financially executing his wife. I documented every transaction, every transfer, every forged signature. This wasn't just emotional evidence, this was criminal. This was the cage I would lock him in. I saved every file, labeled and organized in a secure cloud drive he could never touch. The final piece of my arsenal was the audio. I bought a tiny voice-activated recorder and hid it in the passenger-side sun visor of my father's car. What I heard over the next few weeks was more damning than I could have imagined. I heard them laugh about how clueless I was. I heard Tiana mock my mother's attempts at speech therapy, cruelly imitating her slurred words. It's like living with a ghost, my father agreed, his voice devoid of the grief he displayed at home. But the worst recording was the one that sealed their fate. They were discussing the future. Tiana asked, "When will you be free of her, Ali? I'm tired of waiting." His reply was calm, calculated. "The life insurance policy is substantial. Once Ilara is gone, we can be together properly. This is our blessing in disguise." I listened to that clip on a loop, letting their words fuel the cold fire in my soul. They weren't just waiting for her to die, they were banking on it. They had moved from betrayal to premeditated cruelty. I had their confession. The trap was now fully armed. The opportunity for my revenge arrived in a thick, embossed invitation. My father's architecture firm was hosting its 25th anniversary gala. It was the social event of his career, a black-tie evening where he was to be honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. His pride and joy. Of course, Tiana was to be his date, disguised as my representative since I was too busy with Mom. The hypocrisy was nauseating. This was the perfect stage. Public, prestigious, and filled with every colleague, client, and friend whose opinion he valued. I told him I was proud of him, and that I'd help from afar. I even offered to help with the multimedia presentation. He pathetically declined, but I didn't need his permission. Through a discreet IT contact Aunt Iris knew, I gained remote access to the hotel's entire AV system. The plan was simple: let him have his moment in the spotlight. Let him stand at the pinnacle of his success. And then I would pull the rug out from under him, and everyone would watch him fall. The countdown to his annihilation had begun. The night of the gala, I helped my father with his bow tie, playing the part of the doting daughter. He looked at his reflection, a king surveying his domain. "Your mother would be so proud," he said, the lie slipping so easily from his lips. I just smiled. "I know she is." Tiana arrived, a vision in a slinky silver gown, her arm snaking possessively through his. "We'll be back late, don't wait up," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I watched their car pull away, my heart a steady, cold drum. I wasn't staying home. I changed into a simple, powerful black pantsuit, my battle armor. I kissed my mother's forehead. "Tonight's the night, Mom, watch over me." Aunt Iris arrived to stay with her. "Go get them, Tiger," she whispered, her eyes gleaming with fierce pride. I drove to the hotel alone, a general heading to the battlefield. I didn't enter the glittering ballroom. I found a quiet corner in the lobby cafe, opened my laptop and connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi. The reckoning file was open on my screen. I was ready. From my laptop, I watched the live stream of the event. There he was, my father, Alistair, basking in the glow of his peers. He looked triumphant. Tiana sat at his table, preening as if she were already his wife. When it was time for his award, he took the stage to a thunderous ovation. The lights dimmed, and a bland corporate slideshow began, highlighting his career. His voice was smooth, practiced. "I want to thank my family for their unwavering support during what has been a difficult year." The hypocrisy was a physical taste in my mouth. He spoke about resilience, about building a legacy. He looked directly at Tiana, a soft, intimate smile on his face. That was my cue. My finger hovered over the enter key. This was it, the point of no return. I took a deep, centering breath, channeling all my pain, all my fury into a single, decisive action. I thought of my mother's tear, of their cruel words, of the life insurance policy. I exhaled, and I pressed the key. The corporate slide flickered and died. The screen went black for a heart-stopping second. A confused murmur rippled through the black-tie crowd. My father paused, squinting at the screen. Then my first image appeared, bright and damning. It was a screenshot of their text conversation. The words "Our ticket to freedom" were circled in blazing red. The audience gasped. I could see the blood drain from my father's face in real time. He fumbled for the clicker, jamming the button, but nothing happened. I had locked him out. Then came the audio. The recording from his car, crystal clear, amplified to fill the grand ballroom. Tiana's voice, "When will you be free of her?" His voice, calm and clear. "The life insurance policy is substantial. Once Ilara is gone, this is our blessing in disguise." The murmurs turned into shouts of horror and disgust. People stood up, pointing. Tiana buried her face in her hands. My father stood frozen, a statue of shame, his legacy disintegrating before his eyes under the blinding lights. I stood up from my table and walked into the ballroom. All eyes were on me as I moved through the parted crowd, a figure of stark purpose in a sea of glittering confusion. I ascended the stage steps, my posture straight, my gaze locked on my father. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrified understanding. This was me, his daughter. This was my doing. I gently took the microphone from his limp, cold hand. He didn't resist. I turned to the horrified audience, my voice calm and steady, amplified for all to hear. "My father just thanked his family for their support," I began. "So let me do that properly. Let me thank my mother, Ilara, who is at home fighting for her life while her husband and my best friend plotted her death for a payout." I turned my icy gaze to Tiana, who was sobbing at the table. "And let me thank Tiana for showing me the true, rotting meaning of friendship." The room was in an uproar. Camera phones were held aloft, documenting his ruin. I was not emotional. I was the judge, the jury, and now the executioner. I tapped my phone. The screen changed again, displaying the evidence I'd gathered. Scanned bank statements with red arrows highlighting the transfers to the Cayman Islands. The document for the second mortgage on our home. A photo of a receipt for a romantic weekend getaway, time-stamped the week my mother was diagnosed. The crowd's disgust grew with each slide. The final image was not a document. It was a beautiful, high-resolution portrait of my mother from before the stroke. She was laughing, her eyes sparkling with life and love. Superimposed over it in stark, white text were the words, "This is the woman you be, TIYD." The contrast between her vibrant joy and their vile scheming was a gut punch to everyone in the room. I looked back at my father, who had crumpled into the podium. "Oh, and Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "I've frozen all your accounts. The authorities are waiting outside for you and Tiana. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and theft." I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a final, echoing thud. I didn't look at him again. I turned and walked out, leaving the chaos behind me. The fallout was swift and brutal. The video of the gala went viral within hours. "Architect's twisted blueprint for betrayal" screamed the headlines. By morning, my father was fired from the firm he'd helped build. The police arrested him and Tiana as they tried to flee the hotel. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The life insurance company launched its own investigation, voiding the policy. The house, burdened by the secret mortgage, was seized by the bank. His reputation, the thing he valued more than his family, was utterly destroyed. He became a pariah, a cautionary tale. He tried to call me from jail, but I never answered. The man who had built a life on a foundation of lies was now buried in the rubble of his own making. He lost his career, his freedom, his money, and the family he had so carelessly discarded. He was left with nothing but the echo of his own monstrous choices. Tiana's ruin was just as comprehensive. She was fired from her job after the viral video exposed her to her entire professional network. Her family, horrified, publicly disowned her. Her social media, once a curated gallery of her perfect life, was flooded with thousands of comments branding her a homewrecker and a monster. The friends we had shared since childhood sent me messages of support and cut her off completely. She was served with a restraining order barring her from contacting me or my mother. The money my father had given her was seized as stolen assets. The woman who had coveted my life, my family, my stability, was left with absolutely nothing. No friends, no career, no reputation, and no ill-gotten money. She was utterly alone, exposed to the world as the venomous, envious snake she truly was. Her punishment was not prison, but a lifelong sentence of universal contempt and isolation. The best friend who had shared my deepest secrets was now a stranger, defined only by her betrayal. My mother and I moved into a bright, accessible ground-floor apartment Aunt Iris helped me find. It was filled with light and my mother's artwork, a sanctuary away from the house of horrors. The silence here was peaceful, not heavy. Freed from the toxic energy of my father's presence, my mother began to improve. She started physical therapy with a new vigor. A week after the move, I got an email. It was from a major design firm. They had seen the news and, impressed by my strategic precision and strength, wanted to hire the woman who took down a corrupt architect. They offered me a senior position. I accepted. For the first time in over a year, I looked at my future and saw hope instead of despair. I was no longer Amara, the victim. I was Amara, the survivor, the architect of my own destiny. I had taken the shattered pieces of our lives and begun to rebuild something stronger, something honest, something that was truly ours. Months later, a letter arrived from my father's lawyer. Enclosed was a handwritten note from him. The once proud script was shaky and weak. Amara, you have destroyed me. I have nothing left. I am your father. You owe me forgiveness. You owe me a chance to explain. It was Tiana. She seduced me. She manipulated me. We are blood. How could you do this to me? There was no apology, no remorse for my mother, only blame and self-pity. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. It was like reading a plea from a stranger. I held the paper over the kitchen sink and lit a match, setting a corner ablaze. I watched the flames curl the expensive stationery into black, brittle ash, then wash the remnants down the drain. Some bonds, once broken by such profound betrayal, can never be mended. His words were just hollow echoes from a life I had left behind. The door to that part of my past was closed, locked, and the key had been melted down. A year after the gala, I was pushing my mother in her wheelchair through a botanical garden. She could now speak a few words, and her hello to a passing child was clear and bright. The sun was warm on our faces. In that moment of pure, simple joy, I saw him, my father. He was sitting alone on a bench, looking gaunt and years older. His clothes were worn. He was watching us, his expression a complex map of longing, regret, and shame. My body tensed, my grip tightening on the wheelchair. But he didn't approach. He just looked at us, at the life he had forfeited. Then he did something I didn't expect. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a threat. It was a surrender, an acknowledgement of defeat. He stood up and walked away, disappearing down the path. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He was no longer a monster, just a broken, lonely man. And that felt like a more final victory than any confrontation. He was the past. We were the future. My design career soared. I embraced my story not as a shameful secret, but as a testament to resilience. I started a small side initiative, mentoring young women in crisis, teaching them about financial literacy and personal empowerment. I never mentioned names, but my story was an open secret that gave others strength. After giving a talk at a women's shelter, a young woman approached me, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm in a bad situation. I feel so trapped." "You made me believe I could fight back." I took her hand. "You can," I said, my voice firm with conviction. "You are stronger than you know. Your pain can be your power if you let it." In that moment, I understood the true scope of my victory. It wasn't just about destroying my father and Tiana. It was about my own resurrection. My pain had become a roadmap, my strength a beacon for others. I was no longer just a woman who had been wronged. I was a symbol of the fierce, unyielding power that can be forged in the crucible of heartbreak. "My Amara," my mother's voice was soft, the words slightly slurred but unmistakable. It was the first time she'd strung my name together in a sentence since her stroke. I turned to her, my eyes instantly filling with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. She was sitting in her favourite armchair, a blanket I'd knitted draped over her legs. She was the absolute centre of my universe, and I was hers. Our home was a haven of peace, filled with love and honesty. There were no more whispers, no more lies. I looked into her eyes, which now held a new, profound peace, and I knew I had kept my promise. I had broken the cycle of manipulation and betrayal that had poisoned our lives. My love for her had been the balm that healed my own scars. It was the one pure, untarnished thing that had emerged from the wreckage, and I would spend the rest of my life ensuring it grew in the light. Thanksgiving arrived. I hosted it in our new apartment for Aunt Iris and a few close, true friends. The table was loud, filled with genuine laughter and easy conversation. There was an empty chair at the head of the table, a conscious, powerful choice. It was the space where my father would have sat, holding court, his lies festering in the air. No one mentioned him or Tiana. They were non-entities, ghosts we had collectively exorcised. As I looked around the table at the faces of people who valued me for my strength and character, not for what I could do for them, I felt a profound sense of peace. The family I had was not the one I was born into, but the one I had built and protected. It was forged in trust, mutual respect, and fierce loyalty. It was real. I caught Aunt Iris's eye, and she gave me a warm, knowing smile. The empty chair was not a symbol of loss, but of our hard-won freedom. On the anniversary of the gala, I took a walk alone along the beach. The wind whipped my hair, and the crashing waves mirrored the turmoil I had once held inside, now settled into a powerful, deep calm. I thought not of the revenge, but of the journey. I had been reduced to nothing, a raw, bleeding nerve of betrayal, and from that nothing I had rebuilt myself piece by piece into a woman I respected. My legacy would not be one of vengeance, but of resilience. It would be the foundation I built for my mother's peace. It would be the work I did to help other women. It would be the quiet, unshakable confidence I carried every day. The world knew the story of my humiliation and my fiery payback. They saw the viral video, the headlines. But only I knew the story of the quiet, steadfast courage it took to heal afterward. The sleepless nights planning, the strength it took to smile in the face of my tormentors, the unwavering love for my mother that fueled it all. That was my true triumph. I stood on my balcony watching the city lights twinkle like a field of fallen stars. A sense of completeness settled over me. The chapters of pain, of plotting, of execution were closed. The story of Amara, the betrayed daughter, was over. A new story had begun, and I was its author. I heard my mother's soft, even breathing from her room, a sound that was my anchor and my joy. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I had chosen to become. I had loved, I had lost, I had been broken, and I had risen. Not just to seek justice, but to find myself. The revenge was a closed door. The future was a wide-open sky, and I was finally, unshakably whole. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, turned my back on the darkness, and walked inside, to my mother, to my life, to my peace. We were safe, we were free, and we had won.